When you die, you appear in a cinema with a number of other people who look like you. You find out that they are your previous reincarnations, and soon you all begin watching your next life on the big screen. First story by Rarely Funny. Once I had travelled with my schoolmates to the Royal Albert Hall in London. It struck me then as cavernous, almost as if the architect had taken a traditional gladiator's arena, slapped a dome over it, and then filled it with a winding domino string of seats in concentric circles. 4 stories of seats, all tilted slightly to face the stage, easily 4,000-5,000 people, sitting enraptured by the musical landscapes evoked by the symphony. This theatre I was in now was easily 5-6 times that size. I couldn't be sure, actually, because there were no edges which I could perceive without my vision starting to swim. "Welcome, welcome!" boomed a voice from the stage. The spotlight swiveled to where I was standing, bathing me in golden luminance. "A warm welcome for Jerry Hanley, please. As you all have seen, he lived a long and fruitful life, yielding in the end only to old age. A peaceful end, if you will." I didn't know how to react to the entire audience suddenly rising to their feet, clapping as one for me. I was a schoolteacher in my life. I was used to combative classrooms, and certainly not once had my students ever thought to shower such appreciation for me. I waved weakly in response. "And now for the results. Jerry Hanley will be going to Team Blue." The groans from half the theatre were drowned out only by the rapturous cheers from the rest. Confetti spilled from the rafters, and I found myself being led down from the stage and along the aisles. Along the way, other apparent team members stretched out their hands, and I high-fived as many as I could. I collapsed into my seat, and finally the spotlights deserted me. I soaked in the relative darkness for a while, glad the attention was off me. Perhaps I could now gain some measure of my bearings. A single chime rung out through the theatre, deep and sonorous. Some people got up to leave, while others stayed in their seats, chatting with their neighbors. The giant screen on the stage lit up with the words, "Intermission, 5 minutes." "You want to grab a drink or something? Next one's a bit heavy. A soldier in the Russian army, it seems. Might be good to stretch your legs first." The speaker was the lady on my right. She wore her dark hair in a tidy bob, and was clad in a sensible evening gown. Habit prodded me to introduce myself and to ask for her name, and we shook hands. "What are we going to watch?" I asked. The life of one Peter Ivanov," Beth said. "The same way that we just watched your life unfold, from the very first breath to the last." She laughed at my reaction, then said, "Oh, don't be a prude. There was nothing in your life that we hadn't seen countless times before." "And when this Peter has lived out his life, will he come here too, the way I did?" "Yes," Beth said. "The same for me, and for everyone else here too. We've all been here a long, long time." My eyes drifted to the pamphlet I had found in my seat. At the top I saw Peter's name, but it was the subsequent part of the title which intrigued me. It says, "Reincarnation 23,274,899 here." "Are we all the same person, just in different lifetimes?" I asked. "So, are there other theatres out there, for different people?" "Not quite," Beth said. "I mean, you're right that everyone here is technically the same soul who took turns living on Earth, but there are no other theaters. This is it." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "What's so special about us that only we get reincarnated? I mean, there are so many other people—" "Oh, you misunderstand," Beth laughed. "There's only one soul, one human soul. It's just been split, or copied, I don't know the term, but it's the same soul in every living person on Earth." "Just different physical vessels, then," I said, turning the possibilities over in my mind. different circumstances of birth, different living conditions. But everyone has the exact same soul? Yes, Beth said. You catch on quick. I was quiet for a while. The seconds ticked off the timer on the screen, and the lights began to dim. People streamed back in, holding little bags of what I assumed to be snacks. What's this Team Blue thing they assigned me to? I asked. Everyone makes choices, see? No one here has ever seen the rules themselves, but we've watched enough to, if you will, kind of guess which team someone will end up in, based on what they did on Earth. You're one of the good ones. Morals are hard to pin down. Every society's got their own interpretations, so it always keeps us on our toes. I suppose those people are in Team Red then? I said, pointing to the other half of the theater. Beth nodded. So what's the point of all of it then? What happens when we finally finish watching the lives of everyone on Earth? What happens when one team outnumbers the other? Beth smiled. Hidden projectors whirred to life, and the screen flickered with images of a baby boy being handed over from a midwife to his mother. The audience clapped, and sporadic shouts of, "Go Team Blue" and "Do Team Red proud" emanated from the various pockets of the crowd. I suppose then there will be a final reckoning, Beth said. Second story by Go Puck Yourself. It had already been explained to me by the closest incarnation to me. I was dead. He told me to keep quiet during the movie, but at first I didn't understand. I just dumbly asked how I died. I saw him, well, me, try to subdue a laugh as it was explained to me how they'd all watched me choke out on the tiny chicken bone I'd managed to get lodged in my throat. Apparently, it was amongst the top 5 worst ways some version of me had left the world yet. The strange thought occurred to me to sue the company who'd packaged the chicken strips, before I realized I'd never be earning any money again whatsoever. Not just that, I'd never see Mom, Eric, anyone. My mind felt numb at the thought. It wasn't something that I could wrap my head around. I'd never sit in traffic again, never open my presents at Christmas, never enjoy the bittersweet smell of freshly roasted coffee, never see Laura. Laura! The thought of her exploded in my mind like a firework. I'd left her behind. I'd left her with all those half-formed plans for the future that we'd never be able to put into action. She was probably laughing right now at the absurd way I went out. It was just her kind of dark humor. My heart felt heavy thinking of her. It was the first time I'd felt anything but shock since I sat down in this stupid cinema. I'd never see her again. Never watch that stupid little eye twitch she does as she falls asleep. Never laugh at her otherwise horrible jokes just because she finds them so funny. Never feel her warmth next to me again as I drift off to sleep. No, now I got to watch my next incarnation. Part of me wanted to grab a selection of junk food like I'd usually do at the movies, but after I'd gotten used to the dark, I quickly realized there were no doors. Besides, even if there was, who the heck's gonna want to serve hot dogs in the afterlife? All that remained was me, what must have been hundreds of me, this room, and the next life. Suddenly, the screen came to life. As I watched my newest birth, the me who sat next to me made sure I understood that these first few years would be boring. Apparently every cycle, I'm a bad baby. Always crying, whining. That crying was etched into my brain. The more I listened to it, the more I could hear myself a little in there. It was unmistakable. I watched as this woman who was my mother, but not my mother, cared for me by herself. It was interesting that she was a single mother, too, something my old life had in common with my new. The years dragged by. I went through the motions. I went through school, I made friends, I had done slightly better in my grades than I had before. I watched myself make similar awkward mistakes as my teenage years. I watched myself scream the most horrible language at my new mom, this new woman who raised me. I laughed along with my new self, and all the others watching. I cringed at my embarrassment. I felt disappointment. I felt like I was living again. Except I wasn't. Not really. This wasn't really my life. It was just a life, one of billions. I was watching someone who was both so familiar and a stranger to me. It was the little things. I didn't prefer baths to showers. I'd never get caught dead listening to techno music. It was me broadly, but not entirely. The similarities were there, though. I watched as I started college and settled down into a nearby cafe. Just another day. At this point, I was getting just as bored watching my life as this new me was living it. I was sitting, sipping on a coffee, doing everything I could to avoid a lecture. I noticed how busy the cafe was, and while I was trying to study, I could see that the noise wouldn't allow that to happen. The hum of conversation. I saw myself look up at the seat across from me, no doubt seeing everyone else sitting with someone. That was one thing we had in common. A little bit of perpetual loneliness. I watched myself finish my coffee. I watched myself almost choke on the last drop. For a second I thought I'd be dying the same way again. But I wasn't choking normally. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Both of me. I watched as Laura asked me, "Is this seat taken?" not giving me a chance to answer as she planked herself in the seat across from me. I awkwardly struggled to say something, but all I could get out was a quiet, "No, you can sit there if you want." I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I just watched it unfold dumbly. I watched the awkward silence as I could see myself wondering whether to start a conversation. I watched her look at me with that inquisitive look on her face she always had when she expected something. I had to stop myself from shouting at the screen. I couldn't just let her walk away. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime, it was her that broke the silence. I suppose I should have expected that. She jokingly asked why I was still sitting there when my coffee had been empty the full time. I couldn't feel it, but I knew my face had went red. I joked about how I was just daydreaming, and that I didn't want to go to class. She replied simply, "Well, if you don't want to go, don't go." I watched myself spend that afternoon with her. I watched myself awkwardly ask for her number. No doubt I was terrified, but I couldn't face not seeing her again. Over the next few months, I felt myself fall in love with her again. I watched myself come up with new inside jokes that were different, yet the same. I watched her do her stupid little eye twitch as she fell asleep. I laughed at her horrible jokes just because of how funny she found them. I watched myself sleep next to her. And sometimes I swear I could feel her warmth, as if she was right there beside me. I watched myself do what I had never managed to do before. All those halfway done plans we had, while not the exact same, were still there in spirit. We traveled together. I watched us have kids. I watched us grow old together. I was engrossed in every moment. I barely took my eyes off the screen. But when I did, and I looked around, I saw the same sense of wonder and happiness written across my face countless times. They had to have seen this play out hundreds of times, over centuries and millennia. And it still touched them the same way it did me. Finally, I watched as she passed away first. Not in any funny way this time, just old age. But instead of sadness, the thought that crossed my mind was one of pure joy. She would pass on and enter a cinema somewhere. She would watch her life unfold again. For all the differences across her lifetimes, she too would watch us meet each other. Watch us fall in love again. Heck, she already had. we had together, even if not physically, and we would forever. I greeted the new me who arrived in the cinema with a smile on my face and told him to enjoy the movie.